So this video is answering a question that was a follow-up on a previous video. Viewer asks about using a timer, and now they're asking for the timer to reset some animations or do that kind of stuff. That's pretty particular and a bit difficult to do in general without seeing the project. But building a timer that calls a global transition or a global event that then can trigger something else, that's pretty doable. So let's take a look at how that would work and what I've been able to build. So what I have here is a really simple timer. Haven't spent any time on the looks of it. We got a restart, a start, and a pause button. And let me show you what this does. So as I push start, it'll start to count up. And it's set for 5 seconds. And at 5 seconds, it starts to blink. And we can restart it. We can, if it's going, we can pause. Looks like my blinking functionality is a little broken there, but that's okay. That's a little bit beside the point. And what we got here in our hierarchy, we'll take a look at this. We've got our blinker, which is just a colored panel that turns on and off. The FSM is on the parent object. That way it can turn on and off a child without turning on and off the FSM. The timer, this is again just a panel. This is holding the object. We got a timer text up here that's displaying the time. And then we've got an empty parent here holding the buttons. And again, I've used some, I've used like a vertical layout here on this group and a horizontal layout on these buttons here. Nothing's too special. So let's take a look at these FSMs and see what we have going on. First one, which is kind of the meat of this whole thing, is here is the timer. So let's look at our timer. And you can see I don't necessarily have a lot of flow going on here from state to state. We're using global transitions to go to particular states. So by default, the start, when it starts, it's going to pause the timer. And if we look at that, that's not doing anything. The pause has no commands. It just waits there. And likewise, we have this global transition called pause timer. Same kind of idea. If we call that that event, we'll just sit here and run no code. Restart timer, a little bit more going on there. We have this variable, time elapsed. So this is the total time since the timer's been started, or the time that the timer's been running. We just set that to 0. We convert the float to a string, and then update our GUI text. So again, we're using this UGUI text set text. And this is an action that you have to download through the ecosystem browser. If you haven't downloaded that, it looks a little bit like this. I'll try to put a link to the download in the video description. And again, so we've set this, we had to go, if we didn't want use owner, we need to specify a game object, and I dragged in the time text there. And then I had to tell it what string to display. In this case, having these every frames clicked doesn't actually matter. That's just because I copied and pasted from the other state. So that's our restart timer. Pretty straightforward. Set it to 0 and then update the text so we can see that it hit 0. And then the start timer, this got a little bit more going on. We're using this function here, get time info. And so this is a pretty general action, and you can get a lot of different types of time. So if you were setting up a different timer, maybe you don't want it the way I've set it up. Maybe you want it since startup, since the level loaded. There's a lot of different options here. Delta time is the time between frames. And so that's what I'm choosing. So we're going to get this, basically the length of the last frame, and we're going to store it as a float value, as a time delta. We're going to make sure we do that every frame. And then we are going to add that to our elapsed time. So every frame we add up how much that last frame took. Pretty straightforward. The next step is we need to do a float compare. So what we're doing is we're going to compare this elapsed time with what I'm calling the maximum time. And this is the time when the timer is going to go off, when it's going to send its event. And if they're equal, which is very unlikely to happen with float values. We'll send a message. If the elapsed time is greater than the maximum time, we'll also do the send message event. And as you can see here, the send message just goes down to a send event state, and we'll get there. I'll show you what's in there. Just for display purposes, I also use the ecosystem browser to download a float round action. It doesn't seem that Playmaker comes out of the box with a rounding function. And so this basically just knocks off all the decimals. If you don't have this, the display was kind of hard to look at. So again, if you're not displaying your time, then that doesn't really matter. And then just like we did in the restart timer, we're taking this. Let me step back here. There's one important detail here. We're taking in this elapsed time and we're rounding that, but we're saving it as this new float variable. And if you don't do that, it'll cause a problem. And the reason that is that this time elapsed when it gets started is very, very, very small. And so you round it back to 0. And then it goes on to the next frame and adds again a very small amount, and you round it back to 0. So if you don't save the result of this rounding as a new variable, the time elapsed will get stuck at 0. Unless your computer is running at less than 2 frames per second. You're going to have to do that. And again, we want to do that every frame. And then down here is, once again, we are converting that float to a string, but this time it's the rounded time. We convert it to a time string or a variable that I named a time string. And then once again, updating the UGUI text with this action downloaded from the ecosystem. So the last piece here is this send event. And like in the previous video, we're using a send event. In this case, I chose to broadcast to all because you might have several different objects or FSMs that are waiting to see if the time is up. You can also, with this, exclude self. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. And then I'm calling this global event time is up. Okay, so let's take a look at our, let's start with our variables just so we can see what I have. We talked about all of these. Almost all floats except for the time string. One thing that I have done a little differently here, this max time, this isn't a super well named variable. I've checked this box down here at the bottom for the inspector, and what that allows me to do is here in the inspector I can change its value. I can see it, it's exposed. And so I don't have to go back into the FSM all the time to change that. It's just a little bit easier depending on what you're trying to do. Yep, we got a rounded time. We got our time string. Again, string value, time delta, time elapsed. 4 floats in a string. And let's look at our events. We've got quite a few of these. This finish event, looks like I'm not using that. We can get rid of that. Again, the checkbox on the left indicates that these are global events. So I've got a time is up, start timer, restart timer, and pause timer. Those are all global. And then I've got the send message, which is the internal event or transition that goes to there. So that's that basic setup. Let's look at our buttons. And again, these buttons, okay, so I got a restart, a start timer, and a pause button. You don't need them all. They're all, the FSM is virtually identical. And much like our last video when we were using buttons to do things. So what I've got here is a listen for click, which uses this UGUI button on click event, which again, doesn't come out of the box with Playmaker. You'll need your ecosystem browser to download that. We just wait for a click, and when that happens, we call this event, send event, which kind of poor naming on my part, and comes down to this state here, which once again uses a send event action. In this case, I chose the game object FSM because I know where this object is getting called. But again, maybe that's not what you want. Maybe you need it to be broadcast to more than one object. If you want more than one object, you're going to go down to the broadcast all. it chose the object that I'm sending it to. Again, I chose the FSM. There was only one, and then I could choose my my send events. So all these buttons, we can look here. The start timer, the pause timer. These are all the same FSM. What you'll notice here is that the send event, this line right here, is the only thing that's changing. So those are pretty straightforward. We'll take a look here at the blinker. Again, the blinker is probably the most optional of everything that's here. I just wanted some sort of visual to show in the video, hey, the timer's working. We know time's run out. So what I've got here is we got a start and a restart timer. And what that does here is it simply turns this object off. So what I did was just grab this panel object, drag and dropped it in here, went to game object, activate game object, and it gave me this action. And we want to toggle off the activate. So if you're not familiar with the ability to drag and drop objects into your state, it's pretty handy. There's a lot of functions that you can get there. So whether we're starting brand new or restarting the timer, we want to make sure that that red panel is off. Then we have this, again, making use of global transitions. This time is up. So when the timer gets to its maximum time, it's going to run this state here. And what it's going to do is wait a little bit. And then, I wonder if I actually might have that a little backwards. It's going to wait, and then it's going to call this event. And then it's going to turn that object on. After it's waited that little bit, it's going to go to this state. Oop, looks like I got an extra one there. It goes to this next state, waits a little bit, does this, and then finishes it again. So one thing here, you may notice a little inconsistency on my part here. I don't actually need a finish event here because this finished event gets called after all of this code has run, which is why the order here doesn't really matter. I could have none there and it will work just as well. So there you go. There's a basic timer. It's a little ugly, but it gets the job done. If you are trying to do something a little bit more custom to this, what you're going to want to do, assuming you want something more sophisticated than just a blinking red box, which I hope you do, you're just going to want to, whatever is connected to this global event here, this time is up. It goes, whatever state is happening here is the actions that are going to happen. And so hopefully that answers the questions and gets you started. If you have any more questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. Hope that was helpful. See you next time.